look at this, John chapter 3, if you open up there. And, get to that place. I want to read you a note that I wrote. This is a little note I wrote down from listening to Bruce Lipton and Greg Brayton driving. Usually when I'm driving, I'm going to be driving for quite a few hours, and I'll listen to somebody, Bruce Lipton, Greg Brayton, somebody like that. But this is notes, and so my mind goes to work and really getting in gear and thinking while I'm driving. So I enjoy that. But this really struck me, and I would like to dig into it more because of the whole ideology that I have from Genesis chapter 1 being that it's the construction of the physical body in the womb of a woman. And I see it clearer and clearer and clearer, and this begins to add to that. And then it goes back to just like the song you were talking about John Denver wrote, when he's talking about the flowers and the birds and the trees and etc. And we're one with it, and we say it and we think it and all that. And so when you look at the overlay of Genesis, you see that very same thing, don't you? You see it starts out with the lower base minerals, the earth, what we call the lower base minerals, dirt, earth. Then it goes to the plant kingdom, bird and fish kingdom, etc. And you see a progression, and then finally, whoa, here we are. So we look at that, and I'm sure in our mind, we look at ourselves as the top of the evolutionary chain, I guess. I'm not sure, but I guess that's how we look at it. We're the top of the evolutionary chain. Is that how y'all look at it? Have you ever thought of it that way? Yeah. Okay. And so, so what separates me from an animal? What separates me from a dog? I mean, how many of you have ever had a dog, a cat, a pet that you felt was just pretty close to a human? I guess we all have. I mean, I know growing up we did. We had dogs that we thought were human, and especially if they lived a long time and they were close to you and they got killed or died, you were very emotional, weren't you? Yeah.
Yes.
You know, we just had that happen with Rochelle's little, what was it, Pomeranian? I don't remember. Gracie, she was 16-year-old. She's just getting crippled, her teeth falling out of her head, da 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 da. You know. So we just had that happen. And with that, you know, you have emotional attachments to it, right? And you talk to the dog and the cats and stuff, just like they were human. So we think that that part of the animal kingdom is evolving to our status. So I wanted to read you this. This is a scientific fact about the makeup, the cellular makeup of a worm, an inch-long worm or less, just a little small worm, compared to a human. And I think someone said that Scripture compares us to a worm. And it does give us that analogy, and I say it. A worm has 1,270 plus cells. That's how many cells it takes to make a little worm, approximately an inch long. It has over 20,000 genes. So you think about that. What about a human? In comparison, you think about, you know, if you haven't heard Bruce Lipton, you ought to listen to Bruce Lipton. I highly recommend you listen to him, read his books, whatever. Bruce Lipton says that we are a community made up of over 50 trillion cells. In other words, we are a massive community.
Hallelujah.
Now, I see that in line with Scripture. So when I see that and I look at Scripture and I realize when it's talking about Hittites, Canaanites, Jebusites, etc., all the ites, I see that as a part of our cellular makeup. Because then again, I hear Dr. Bruce Lipton talk about all diseases are already alive inside you. They're already inside your physical body, and what keeps them at bay is your immune system. So it kind of keeps them regulated so that they don't come together and form a larger community. If they formed a large community and it got large enough, we would call that a cancer. Because that's just what happens. That's basically what happens. Do cancer cells live in us? Yes, they do, as well as all the other colds, flus, viruses, etc. Those things are there. So really, in that vein of thinking, and a lot of the medical sciences are going in that, flow into that vein of thinking, and I kind of resonate with it, so be it true or false, I'm not sure, but I resonate with the ideas that are attached to that, that what causes colds and other viruses to begin to take a hold of our body is stress. And I agree with that, because stress is the #1 killer. And I think that now medical science does say this, that 90 to 95% of everybody that's in the hospital is there as a result of stress. That's excessive stress, where you get under stress. You know, we live in a society that's designed to keep us stressful. It is, it does. And it does it usually through the monetary system. You know, whatever we're caught under the monetary system, don't have enough, or trying to get more, or etc. And slowly we weigh ourselves down under that material ideology. Right? I'm not just talking to me, right? I'm talking to y'all. We do that. We kind of get weighed down under that stress. And a lot of it probably is good, trying to improve the things about my life or my living conditions, or etc. But still putting myself under stress, and then as a result of that, something happens to my body. Could it be stress related? Well, I agree with them. I say yes, it probably is. So what about the human body that has over 50 trillion cells? Now there's only 1,275 cells in a worm, less than an inch long. And yet it has 20,000 genes. So if you and I are made up of over 50 trillion cells, then wow, we should have a massive gene population, right? Wrong. No. Matter of fact, the human being with over 50 trillion cells, they have come to find out through the Genome Project that a human only has approximately 21,000 genes. So we don't hardly have any more genes than an inch worm. So what this does is you have to look at this and you begin to ask yourself the question, do the situations that arise in my life become a part of a genetic problem that I've gained from my parents or grandparents or whatever? And you have to answer it, couldn't be. It could not be, period. And that's basically a part of the whole ideology of Bruce Lipton and the biology of belief, and where he's going with the genes and the new science that has been introduced and is really becoming, I think, a stronghold in the community of science, and that is epigenetics. Epi is a Greek word that's used throughout the Greek New Testament, like epiorus, pronounced more or less epiranus or epiorus. And that actually is the word for heaven in Greek. And it just simply means above. That's what the word above means. Epi means above. So when they say epigenetics, it means then your life is controlled epigenetically, something beyond your gene structure. Because if you only have 20 or 21,000 genes as compared to a worm, a ½ inch long, that has 20,000 genes, it's obviously not a gene issue. So what is the issue? And here's what he says. What is the difference in a worm and a human? Consciousness, spirit. And I want to take it just a little bit different. Let me add this in my ideology: consciousness, spirit, soul. In other words, your psychological, neurological, nervous system. And you think about that. That would be what would be different.
So what we've all been told was genetic from your family tree really probably has more to do with the way you were raised and deal with stress from your family tree. So if a family's got a history of something, it's not because of the genes, it's because of the negative energy that we take into our lives.
And then when you did it that way and say it that way, then you would have to add epi to it, because it's beyond you. It was environmental. It was around you. It was what happened. Now, and you have to say this. You have to look at this with a very merciful and forgiving mind, because it is not your parents' fault. Even though it would appear to be your parents' fault. If you were raised in a very stressful, a very angry, a very hostile environment, and that was the input that was yours, and you blame your parents, you put yourself in a cycle and put yourself as a judge that you have not any need to be, and that would cause more stress.
You chose not to break the cycle.
You chose to just become more a part of the aggravation of it. That's all you would do. But if you open your mind and you begin to look at it, you do not know the condition your parents were raised in, or their parents, or what, or the situations that they chose to cause that kind of hostility, or anger, or grace, or mercy. I mean, I'm sure there are people who are raised in gracious, merciful environments. I wasn't raised in a hostile environment necessarily. I was blessed in that respect. I never heard my grandmother, grandma, and grandpa ever argue or say anything angry or hostile. That was not presented in front of me. Never heard my mom and daddy. Other than I can vaguely remember as a child hearing them through the wall at night. And that's the only time I ever remember hearing them fight or fuss or whatever. So I was blessed in that. I didn't have that kind of a input. So I guess I wasn't angry, and I didn't have any need to be angry or hostile. So anyway, the difference, and I'm getting off my train of thought. The difference is consciousness, spirit, soul, and then I add this psychological, neurological nerve system. Your psyche, which is your soul, which I feel that one of the greatest deterrents that we have had from the Christian community was the literalist interpretation of Genesis 1, 2, 3, and from there the rest of the whole Bible. The domino effect of making all of that historical, making all of that literal, and not looking at it the way that I see and I feel that it should be looked at. So I wanted to start out with John chapter 3. If you'll open there with me, I want you to look at this. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. John chapter 3. Y'all know this verse, and I think we used this verse somewhat a number of weeks back, but I wanted to look at it again in line with a couple of other verses. John chapter 3, verse 5. Jesus said, "Truly or verily I say unto you, except a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom." And that word enter actually is the Greek "ado," and it just simply means to consider or be aware of or perceive. It doesn't have anything to do with literal, physical meeting Peter at the gate. You know, they made a lot of good jokes about that, meeting Peter at the gate. That's not what Jesus is saying, y'all. Peter got the key to the gate. If you're not right and you don't do it, then he ain't gonna let you in. He can. That's not what that means. It means perception, idu, in the Greek. It means to perceive, or it means to consider, or to know, like in knowing, gnosko, intuitive things. The kingdom. Verse 6 is that thou which is born of the flesh is flesh, thou which is born of the Spirit is spirit. Marvel not that I said unto you, you must be born again. The wind blows where it lists, and you hear the sound. You cannot tell where it comes and where it goes. So is everyone born of the Spirit. Nicodemus answered, and he said unto him, how can this be? And Jesus said unto him, are you a master of Israel? Now this is a kind of a slap in the face to a religious mind. Nicodemus being that religious mind. That slap in the face is, this you should know. If you have gained anything, any knowledge at all, in other words, master, if you become a master of anything, or if you're a student of it, you ought to know this. But you know, we don't know that. We still don't know what he's talking about here. We're still making all this literal. We're still making this a conversation between Jesus and Nicodemus, or Jesus and his disciples, and we still many times lag behind because of that ideology and that mindset that we've gotten from the literist historical Christianity. It's hard for us to take any of these stories and look into the mirror and look at myself as Nicodemus, look at myself as the disciples, look at myself as the apostle. It's hard to do that without the training that we need to realize this is all referring to me, myself, and I. The whole community of me, the whole 50 trillion of it. You know?
People look at heaven as being a place far away, and they look at kingdom as being the same thing as heaven.
Absolutely, they do. I think that many times they look at the kingdom as a gated system around this ethereal heavenly city out there, and to go into the kingdom is to go through those massive gates, and not understanding again, gates are inside you. They are outside you, as on the skin, like it's the eyes are the gates, the nose are the gates, mouth is the gates, ears are the gates, feelings are the gates. And these are things that if we don't open our eyes, we keep the closed eye gate, and we can't see. Or the same thing's true there. Again, it has to do with the difference between exotericism, outward, and esotericism, inward. All ancient stories were esoteric. All of them. All of them. I'm reading, well, I'm always reading 2 or 3 books at a time. One book I'm reading now, is about the difference between the exoteric and the esoteric. And in this particular book, it's talking about the story of Moses that was actually copied from a Chaldean story of Missis, M-I-S-I-S, who was a mythological character, exactly the same story as the Moses story. Then it talks about the story of Joc, J-O-C. It's exactly the same story as the story of Jacob, Jacob, who became Israel. So, you know, you read this material, and this material is ancient, and then you read about it in another culture that told the same exact story as supposedly the Israelites told, and you have to scratch your head. Wait a minute, it's not hard historically to look at this story and realize the story of Jacob or Moses or Noah, I can't get it any further back than 3,600 years, no matter how far or how hard, because it just wasn't there. But then I can go back 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 and read the same story in another culture about the same thing. And to embrace an idea to say they had it before the Israelites had it, but they had it, and it was a story told by the devil, that the Israelites got it from them, but it was a story told by God. I mean, to me, that is dumb. I don't know. I mean, to me, it's just dumb. So, again, here's the hard part. Here's the hard part, I'll tell you. I know up front it's the hard part. For me to say the story of Jesus is a repeat of the story of Horus, almost the spelling is singular. J's can be J is a German for the H in Egypt. So, Horus, Jesus. Oh, we almost got the same identical spelling. And here, this story was told 5,000, 6,000 years ago. If you really get down to it, probably 20,000, 25,000, 30,000, 36,000. Anyway. Yeah, but I know it is a dilemma. I know it is. That's terrible. I know it is. It really is not, if we would dare to just think and open ourselves outside our box. Not to put one down as to lift the other up, but to put them both on a plane to where they can speak to me, to where they can speak to me inwardly. And therefore, if I have to embrace with love and with compassion the story of Jesus and reject the story of Horus, then maybe I need to check myself and see if I couldn't embrace something in the story of Horus that would minister to me and strengthen me. What would be so obscene about that? And then again, I can hear all of those screaming back in my, yeah, but Jesus was the only, or Horace was a lie, all those other things. Words are very deceptive. Only is a very deceptive word. When it's me and my only, that's very deceptive. That really, you think about it and realize the limitations that we put on this figure, this thing we call God. God couldn't do that for them. It's just for us. Therefore, and no more. I mean, isn't that ridiculous that we do that? I did that. I did that. So anyway, Jesus is talking to Nicodemus, who is a mythical character coming to him at a mythical time, telling a mythical story. Comes to him at night. Wow. There's a tremendous truth in that. The light is always hidden in darkness. Always. That's just the way it is. We look at the matter, the physical, the density of the flesh, the physical body. It represents darkness. And what's hid in it? The light. You are the light of the world. Jesus' own words, right? You are the light of the world. So he said, Jesus answered and he said unto him, are you a master of Israel and you don't know this? Truly I say unto you, we speak that which we do know, and we testify that we've seen, and you receive not witness. Now, I have told you earthly things, but you didn't believe them or trust them. How shall you trust if I tell you of heavenly things or spiritual truth? No man hath ascended up to heaven, but he that came down from heaven. Now that's, you have to stop and chew on that one. That's pretty profound. Again, do your astrological wheel. I will in just a minute. I want to show you something about the wheel. Put the astrological wheel and you begin to realize it's from that energy, that essence of space, that essence of the hosts, the sky, all of those things out there that are power, that are builders, they are constructors of energy, and they are the ones that built me. He said, that's where I came. I came from up there. All of us did. No man hath ascended to heaven, but he that came down from heaven, and even the Son of Man which is in heaven. And that's the Moses, that's the Adam Kidmon, that's the God-man in the sky. Verse 14. And here's what I wanted to talk about a little this morning. As Moses lifted the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whosoever trusts him should not perish, but have eternal. And I'm changing that word belief from the King James. I change it to trust, simply because it is the Greek word pistis, and the Greek word pistis does not mean an ideology of belief systems. The word pistis actually means to trust. And trust is an intuitive thing. Trust is something that comes deeper in your heart. It's not something that you know because you put your head around a certain amount of ideas and said, wow, I believe this with my whole heart. Do you understand the difference? I pray that we would. You have to think about it to even understand the difference in what I just said. Because you don't have to wrap your head around a bunch of book learning, a bunch of preaching, or a bunch of this, or a bunch of that, or a bunch of ideas that you call your belief. You don't have to wrap your head around nothing. Trust comes up out of your heart. Trust is something that's in your gut. Trust is intuitive. Trust can be broken, but trust can be regained. I realize that. They say if you ever break your trust with someone, it's almost impossible or hard to gain it back. I realize that, but it can be gained back. Should be gained back. We should learn to trust, because trust is the bottom line issue. It's a heart issue. Trust is not a head issue. And that word pistis needs to take on a different concept and ideology other than a belief and faith. Even though they take faith from the same identical word. Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is pistis. Now trust is. Trust is the evidence of things that's deeper, that's in your heart. It's not some belief you've wrapped your head around. And you know good and well that we all have refrigerator verses and we've memorized different things and we have been taught, I believe this. Trust, again, is something deep. So I always try to make that distinction when I'm reading those words, especially if I'm reading the word Greek pistis, which is translated belief or believeth and faith in many places. But it's not the word for belief like an idea or ideologies that we have been taught to believe. Now, Verse 14, it says, as Moses lifted up the serpent. Now, you can go with me if you want. I want to go to two places. I want to go to Matthew chapter 14, and I want to go to Numbers chapter 21, where that story of Moses lifting the serpent. Moses in Numbers 21, and then I will come back to Matthew 14. So if you want to mark that place off in your Bible, where you can come back and look at that with me. I'll come back over to it.
Numbers what?
Numbers chapter 21. Because I want to look at this because Jesus is making this analogy. And Jesus, in this analogy, you have to listen to it. Let me read it again. So as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son, and here the King James puts a capital S on Son, like it is an implication. What do you think the Son of Man in John chapter 3, verse 14 is implying? What do you think it is?
Jesus.
Jesus, of course. It's not implying you. It's implying Jesus. It's implying Him. He is the one who is the Son of Man that must be lifted up. And it goes on, it says, that whosoever trusts in Him should not perish but have eternal life. Now when you are told to look at this story of Jesus on a pole or on a wooden cross, right? Isn't that how they do it? That's how they build it? You do not look at Jesus and call Him a snake on a cross. Even though this is an analogy that's given in this story that He is the serpent, if you're going to look at the serpent as a snake on a pole. Right? But yet, where does that idea come from? Where is that idea? Is that idea something that was new to the Israelites, to the Hebrew people? Is that something that they concocted, or is that something that God told them only? No. That story goes back infinitum. It goes back beyond time immemorial that we know of, the story of the serpent on the pole. Our problem is because of dumbing down through literalist Christianity, our problem is not knowing the story of the serpent on the pole, but only accepting this limited view of this serpent on the pole and thinking that it was the story of Jesus on the cross. So let me read here the story that's in Numbers 21. And again, this story is a repeat from Sanskrit, from the Chaldeans, Babylonians, many of these ancient cultures that predate Egyptian, predate the Israelite story or the Hebrew story. So here we go. Numbers chapter 21. Verse 6, it says, And the Lord sent a fiery serpent among the people, and the serpent bit the people. And this serpent bit the people, and much people of Israel died. And of course, this word serpent, I want you to hear this word. This word serpent is nachesh. Nachesh. This is the same word serpent used in Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. Nachesh. Non, shach, chayet, and sheen. Nachesh. Nachesh. Let me spell it for you really quick so that you will kind of see. You'll see how that word, that's serpent. Okay, that's the serpent. That's one word. That word is used here. Okay, that's nachesh. Verse 7. It says, Therefore the people came to Moses and they said, We have sinned. We have spoken against the Lord and against you. Pray unto the Lord that He take away the nachesh. You got to do that with your upper clearing your throat. Nachesh from us, and Moses prayed for the people. Now, if I told you that this nachesh had so much to do with your neurological, psychological, and this other part of your being nervous system, it has more to do with that than any of the physical apparatus of your body. And it's in that where stress lives. Could y'all kind of just let that ruminate, just chew on that a little bit? In that is where stress will live or die. It's in that where stress, if you have stress for a sudden moment, like for instance a little 120-pound woman, the car's laying on top of her child, and she all of a sudden that stress hits her body, and where does it go? Where does it come from? That stress is something, it's created inside her body. It's created in her body, and all of a sudden through that stress, she has the energy of a Hulk and pick up a car. Now that's a phenomenal. But now if she lived that way, you know what that stress would do? That's something that was wonderful for a moment to have because it energized, it gave you superhuman strength. And it did it through your neurological, psychological nerve system. That's how it did it. It sent through your nerve system unlimited strength and ability. But if it stayed in there, it would break down the chemical makeup of your body, and then it would wind up, stress would create disease. It would create malfunction in your physical body. So for it just to be there for a moment, that was wonderful. Well, that's your nachesh. That's your serpent. That's your serpent on the pole. Now let me read a little bit further. Verse 7. Therefore the people came to Moses and said, we have sinned. I'm sorry, let's drop down to verse 8. Verse 8. And the Lord said, and the Lord said unto Moses, make you a fiery saraf. 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 Make you a fiery saraf. Let's see. That's a fay and sa. Yeah, saraf. Serpent. Now anybody, I don't think you have to have a 3rd or 4th grade education, can look at that and say, wow, there's nothing even similar about them glimpses except the sheen. Right? Can you see that? This is sheen, rash, fat. This is non-chat, sheen. I mean, completely different words, but in the English they say the same thing. Can you see that? Y'all can see that? Yep. Now I realize you can't see that if you don't read Hebrew. I know that. If all you're going to do is read English, and every time that they see serpent, and you're going to think the same thing in every case when it's not referring to the same thing, then you're not going to get the right picture of what it's saying. Can you understand that? Can you agree with that? I don't think that's rocket science. I don't think it would be really difficult and hard. What's the difference? There is a vital difference in these two words, and the difference is not just in the value, it's in all the meanings of the different words. It's how they're used and what's behind the usage of them. Before we go to the saraf, let me go ahead and get some more about the nachesh. I want you to get a better understanding. You get a better understanding of the nachesh, and you realize this is one of the things that Christianity's kept us away from. It's called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's the place they don't want you to go. You do not dare go there. You know why? If you go there, you'll become like God. And dare be that you begin to be like God. Because if you begin to be like God, you know the difference between right and left, or good and evil. Isn't that what they told you? Does that not sound pretty dumb? You know that sounds bizarre and dumb, but if you're sitting in a religious church on Sunday morning, that makes good preaching. Because you will say, and you'll look at that literally, and you'll say, yeah, can't do that, can't be like God, got to be dumb like us. We got to be dumb now, right? Now look what Jesus says in Matthew 14. Matthew 14. And now I'll come back to the Nachesh. Matthew 14, it says in verse 34. This is I would like to say that this again is one of those foundational root scriptures. Should be something that every child learns at an early age. So in that, what I really meant by saying that is every spiritual child and human child should learn these things at an early age, but we don't. We're not taught, and we go to church and we're taught just the exact opposite. Now you think about the paradox of what I'm about to say. Think about this. We're taught to be afraid of the snake, so we are afraid of snakes, right? When we should not be taught to be afraid of the snake. I heard a guy give a perfect analogy. He said this black snake, or king snake, went slithering through the backyard of this woman's house. And her little Johnny, who's 4-year-old, is out there, and she sees that big black snake swirling toward him, and she comes out in the backyard. What is she going to do? Y'all give me...
Kill it.
She's going to kill that snake, right? Well, what's she going to do first?
Take that child.
She's going to save little Johnny. She comes screaming to run. Oh, Johnny, 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 Johnny! It's a snake. And so what does she do? She goes and retrieves him safely, and then she gets the hole, the mattock, the shotgun, or whatever. She's going to blow the head off that thing, right? What did she just do to little Johnny?
Put fear in them.
She put fear in him. He is now automatically afraid of something he don't even know. Now, if that had been a little kid come across the yard there, and what would be her response? Would be totally different, would it not?
Yeah.
I realize that y'all are going to defend your right to chop the head off a snake. I know you are. I'm not trying to stop you from doing it. I'm just trying to give you an analogy. Now,
Go ahead and kill that king snake and you let all the other snakes and the rats and everything else be around me.
because you don't know, okay? Now, take that same scenario, and here is a mother who understands the difference in mammals. She understands that a king snake is a good snake to have in the backyard, that it keeps poison spiders away from little Johnny. It protects Johnny from other rodents and different things, and she knows that that is a good thing. So she comes out there, and she's calm, and she says, little Johnny, come here, let me show you this. And little Johnny goes over, he sees this king snake swirling around. She starts to describe it, explain it. He looks at it, he ain't a bit afraid of it. Now that's foreign for you to think, isn't it? See, it's hard for us to think that. You know why? We have been so dumbed down, so beat down by the religious ideologies that we can't read a book with an open mind and let that open mind teach us the truth. Why? Preconceived notions, preconceived ideas, taught to believe certain ways. And I pray that you can think about that analogy without saying, yeah, but. But I know you have a hard time. I know you do. I know we do. And it's like my granddaughter Sarah made an offer on a house, and so they accepted her offer. So if they get everything done to the house according to the offer and all that, then she's going to be buying her first home, and I'm tickled for her. Well, she wanted Papa to come and inspect the house and go through the house and check everything out and see the things that we need to do and da-da-da. So I did. Well, I crawled up in the attic, and the first thing I noticed when I got up in the attic, my God, there was about 4 snake skins up there.
Oh, good.
Oh, Lord, it's a snake den. Oh. I don't necessarily know why they were up there, but they were up there. It was just like I found, some of you have seen the one I found back here in this little building that we used to store our chairs and different furniture and things. I found a big, nice black snake skin. I mean, it had his head, it had his eyeballs. It was a good 6-foot skin. And I wanted to keep it. I did have it in a bag, and I did keep it, and somehow or another got missing. Y'all know what I mean? It got gone. I wanted to keep it so I could just hold it by the tail right here and show you an analogy of something about this that has spoke for centuries, and we don't pay any attention to it. And so look what Jesus says right here. Matthew 14, verse 34, it says, all these things spake Jesus unto the multitude in parables. Now, all of the things that he's talking about that he spoke in parables were, he talked about the story of Jonah, and you know what he called it? parable. He never talked about the historical story. He talks about the story of Jacob. He talks about the story of Abraham. And you know what he called them? Parables. The exact same thing that the Apostle Paul does in Galatians 4, where Paul talks about the story of Abram and Sarah, and he called that an allegory, a parable. Same thing, parables. So he talked about all these stories. So now if you go back in the Old Testament, you follow this same mode of thinking, and you look at those stories, you say, wait, these stories are allegories. These are parables. They're not historical. They're not literal. And so if you take that and you begin to apply that to your way of thinking, then it begins to make everything different. Go back with me now to Genesis chapter 2. This is a parable. This is an allegory. This is a story. And now I want you to see this story. I want to do it this way. I want to do it a little. Let me do it a little more proportional. I want my proportions to be pretty close so that you can get a better. Now, normally, if I would, do y'all know what to call that? Ouroboros. That's a typical common name. 2,000 years ago, everybody would have known. Little Johnny, 2-year-old, would have known that. He would have known that, and he would have understood what that was. And here's how he would have looked at that. Here's exactly how he would have looked at that. I'm doing this in red because I want you to think of it this way. If I'm talking about the cross, always, I'm not talking about a wooden pole that a guy had to hang on. I'm talking about the cardinal cross that every man, woman, boy, girl hangs on. And here is what that cross is made up of. It's made up of the Ouroboros. And you can actually Google this, and you can see it. If you saw the Milky Way galaxy, you would see the Milky Way galaxy just exactly like that. And it does this. It does it just with the stars and all of the things swirling, da 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 da. And that's exactly what it looks like. The Milky Way galaxy looks just exactly like this. It looks like a serpent that's swallowing its tail. Now, why would you have such a gross, bizarre configuration of stars, planets, moons, and galaxies that make up our Milky Way galaxy? But that's what this means. This represents the Ouroboros. That's what it is, the Milky Way galaxy. Just go look at it, show you a good picture of it. You may have to, y'all seen those pictures where you got to sit there and kind of look at them or stare at them for a while, and then you finally see it, get the picture that's inside the picture? Well, that's exactly how this is. The more you stare at it and you look at it, you go, wow, look at it. It is. It's a snake eating its tail. It's a serpent eating its tail. And so, and I did it here because I wanted you to see it right here at this point. This is where death is swallowed up into life. And it just happened. It just happened. Here's another word for it. Passover. All of these things, they're woven in the environment. Everything in the environment is speaking of it right now. Look at all the plants. What are those plants all telling you? That they have arisen out of death into life. Were they really dead? No, it just seemed like they were. They didn't have any clothes. They didn't have any leaves. They didn't have any flowers. They didn't have any fruit. They appeared to be dead. Why? Because they have moved through this cycle. And this cycle is space, not heaven. This cycle is in space, and it's called time. And basically, that's what the Ouroboros is all about, the serpent eating its tail. So how am I applying this serpent to this serpent, the Nachash, in Genesis chapter 3? I'm telling you that in Genesis chapter 3, the Nachash, if you want to look at it with me, the Nachash in Genesis chapter 3:1 says, now the Nachash, that's the same one Moses is referring to. That's the same one Jesus is referring to. Jesus is saying, look, my story is just about this same ancient story about the Ouroboros, about the serpent eating its tail. That I am swallowing death up in life. And why do they use a snake for that analogy? They do it for this very reason. If I had that 6-foot skin right here, you would not be afraid of that skin. You would have no reason to be afraid of that skin. But if I had that black snake standing up here holding by the tail and wiggling down there, you say, oh God, don't turn it loose. And I said, oh, oops, there he goes, slithering. Ah! Here we go. I'm going to try that one day as a literal analogy and just see what happens. And see if everybody gets excited, stands on the table and says, oh, that's sweet, nice, come over here, let me pet you.
Make sure the door's open.
Where do you want a new door at? Wow, I mean, it's funny, but think about it. What does that represent? What is the symbol behind this? What is this parable about? Oh, if you could get it, this parable is about you swallowing up the death of your negativity by the life of your neurological ability to think, to have knowledge, to have gnosis, to have that input of the ability. Knowledge is power. Without that knowledge, you are kept in darkness. You're kept weak. We're kept beat down. We are deceived. But with that knowledge comes what? Freedom. I don't have to be afraid of that snake. I don't have to keep the stress going. I can settle it down and relieve my body of all of this tension.
I don't have to be afraid of anything.
And more than anything, deliver myself from fear. Because what does the scripture say? Fear hath what?
Torment.
Torment. Torment. What does torment do? Torment will destroy you. It will literally destroy you. It will just put us in all kinds of bondage. So, of course, this is Aries. This is the this is a beautiful, beautiful symbol. And this, if we can again grasp the beauty of the swastika in its rightful place, if we can do that and we realize what it's capturing, what that swastika is talking about is the movement of this energy field. That's what the true swastika is about. It's not a symbol that Hitler created. It's a symbol Hitler perverted. The symbol is common. It's common to this. In everything I'm telling you, this symbol is common to it. It's the symbol of heaven and earth as one energy, one entity, one system. Heaven not where I'm going to, but heaven who I am. Earth not that which I'm walking on, but that which I'm made of. And if I look at the spelling of these words in Hebrew, and as you have seen me do, I don't have to do it right now, but when I look at heaven, I realize I'm made up of that. I am heaven. I'm heaven going somewhere. And if I look at that and I begin to embrace that, and I go, hey, I'm blessed about to happen. I'm a blessing fixing to unfold, explode. You see yourself in that light, it's a whole different ball game. You understand what I mean?
If you see yourself in that light, how can you be afraid of anything?
And why should you?
I mean,
Why should you? Why should you have any fear? And if we begin to, the more we embrace it, God, the more you embrace this, the more you entertain this, the more you muse on it, the more you chew on it, the more you think about it, guess what happens? The stronger you get, the freer you are,
you become so
the happier
at
you
peace. You become so at peace.
the more peaceful you are. You know what? When you put this and you realize that this, again, this is the Sabbath. This is the capstone. This is where the peace is at. This is the head. And if I draw it, if I draw it in the, draw my little child right here. You know what I'm saying? This is the child's head. He's happy. Of course he's happy. I mean, how could he not be, right? I mean, that's the head. That's Aries. That's the ram. Taurus, the shoulder. I mean, this is the Son of Man on the pole. This is what Jesus was referring to. He's using an ancient symbol. He's using the most common of all the ancient symbols. But it is not common to us today. It's getting that way to us. And us, the people who embrace this kind of thinking, are getting free from that that brainwashing we've been under. Like I was telling y'all earlier about the conference, a little lady that Ray, call her Ray, hello Ray, she just excited and turned on because she's free from the bondage that she's been put under from a religious system. And not her, but thousands and thousands of people getting free, embracing this idea, this new, it's not new. There's nothing new. Nothing's new. What was, is. So we're not discovering something that hadn't been. We're just uncovering something that's always been. And it's become fresh and new manna for us. Okay, well, I'll just stop there. I wanted to incorporate this with some ideas that we have been talking about here about the hosts. This is the hosts. The astrological wheel is the host. The hosts are the Elohims. The Elohims is the angles of the energy that's constantly filling us and energizing us. And so, I'm just going to stop right there. Any questions? I'll come back more and visit the Saraf. It's not used a lot in the scriptures, but I'll come back and incorporate it and do some things with it as compared to the Nachash. Okay?
All right.
the scripture tells us we have not been given the spirit of fear.
Yep.
The power.
Power, love,
And
and a sound mind.
But yet, religion itself teaches us to be afraid of everything.
And therefore, of God.
Let me read you this. I had a note here to read this anyway. Steve just said that. We should never fear the world of the unseen, or what we call spirit world, or blank space, or darkness. For there's nothing to fear there. The only thing that there is there is the potential for everything. In other words, the world of the unseen is the domain of creativity, or the divine essence, or the unseen energy waiting on us to pull on it or to draw from it. I want you to hear this. It's waiting for you and me to pull on it or draw from it. Because it's a potential power for everything. Now, if out of stress we draw negative from it, do you think that it can possibly recreate our negativity? It does, because it's just created. It's not biased as to what it creates. It creates a hell of a lot of hell if that's what you want. The world of the seen is the world of tricks and deceits, manipulations. And religion uses this to control or to deceive us by telling us that there are demons and ghosts and devils and so forth in the world of the unseen. You think about it. The world of religion has taught you and me to fear fire because they said that's the domain of Satan. Yet the right opposite is true. Even the scripture says that God is a consuming fire. Isn't that amazing? And so the serpent, as another analogy that religion has told us to be afraid of and called it demonic, is the very thing that we need to learn to embrace, to realize that it is the picture of life swallowing up death. That's why the skin of a snake is a picture of being born again. Always was used that way. Why? Because the serpent shows that it's new again. Because it got rid of the old. Now, wouldn't that be something if we would do that? And just shed the old? And just let it lay where it lay? We don't do it. Bless God, we'll pick it up, that dead thing, that event, that thing, trauma that happened to me. I'll carry it around, prop it up. I don't care how bad it stinks. I'll put it in a bag and put it in my pocket.
Yeah, we'll put it on the altar and then carry the altar.
There you go, Art Derby. Yeah. Yeah, that was good. Yeah. The world of the seen is the world of tricks, deceits, manipulations. This religion uses to control us, to deceive us by telling us that there are demons and ghosts and devils and stuff, which don't even exist, except through religion and through religious lies and stories, to put you and me in fear, which the Bible tells us God has not given us a spirit of fear, but power, love, and a sound mind. And as long as they can keep you in that state of fear, they can keep a noose around your neck. And they've done that to us, but thank God, we have untied the noose, haven't we?
That's why they took some of the books out of the Bible.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Which I was going to bring the book of Jasher. I was wanting to talk about some of this from the book of Jasher. I was going to bring the book of Enoch. I mean, I've got a lot of books that have been totally deleted from the Bible. I have the apocalyptic books. They were deleted from the King James Bible. Still are maintained in some of the Catholic Bible.
That's all I.
So, aren't they?
Yes.
There's 13 books in the Catholic Bible. It's not in the King
I
James.
got a Catholic Bible that does have, I don't.
I have those. So, and there's a value in all of
Hold
them.
on to it.
That's the beauty of it. There's a value in it. If you and I would read the book of Jasher and or the book of Enoch and stay with the mode of thinking that those books were written for, the mode of thinking those books were written for were allegorical, mythological, not literal. They were written for symbolic. Why? So that you could think, so that you could get here in your mind. That's where children live. You don't understand that? Children live in that imaginary place. They can do all kinds of things. We should try that. If you could only imagine. Right? That was the song.
That is a song.
There's actually another song called I Can Only Imagine.
Yeah.
That was our theme song from a conference here 6 years ago.
No, I'm not talking about John Lennon's Imagine. There's a song called
Yeah,
Only Imagine.
yeah.
It's
If I
a
could
different-
only
if I
imagine
could-
or something like that.
It's different.
So it's a newer
Two
song?
different.
It's from actually about the same era. It's probably 70s or 80s.
Let me see if I can find it.
Are we talking about two different songs?
Yeah.
Two different songs.
Yeah.
I can only imagine.
And they made a movie out of it.
Oh, did they?
I think it was the theme of to a movie. if I remember right.
Oh, man.
How did we ever buy into some of this? mean,
I ain't got a clue.
Jesus said very, very clearly, he only taught in parables. And we take some of those stories and say, well, it said in the Old Testament they were real, so I guess Jesus was lying, right?
Well, you know, I think right off the bat, I had a hard time with it because that was some of my problems with Dake. I would say, well, you make it so confusing. Do I take it literal or spiritual? So for right out of the get-go, because I wasn't ingrained in the
You find it the
literal,
right way?